Hello everyone, today we're going to look at the craziest game I think I've ever witnessed in chess between Alexander Alekhine and Mr. No Name. Now there are debates as to whether this game is legit or not, but we'll go through it anyway because it's really interesting. There's a lot of combinations and moves to look through. At one point there are indeed 5 queens on the board and I don't know how anyone can calculate through that. So let's begin though. Alekhine is white, Mr. No Name is black. Alekhine plays e4, black plays the French e6 and d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6 and bishop g5, followed by bishop to b4, both knights are pinned. Here comes e5, attacking the knight on f6. h6 is played to kick away the bishop. Now, in this opening, more often than not, bishop d2 is played here, followed by bishop takes c3, b takes, and then knight jumps to e4, followed by queen g4 and g6. Continuations could be bishop d3, knight takes d2, king takes, and then c5, and it's relatively equal for both sides. But after h6, Alekhine decides to take on f6 with the pawn, which is still a decent move, but it just gets into some crazy complications after h takes g5 and now f takes g7, attacking the rook on h8. So the rook is forced to move to g8, and now Alekhine played, I think, a good move, h4, to complicate matters even more. So here, if let's say rook takes g7, we can just take on g5, queen takes and knight f3 after queen f6. White is slightly better, has better development, and this king side is destroyed. We've got the open rook on the h file, so white's doing well, I would say. In the game though, Mr. No Name decided to take on h4 with the pawn, and Alekhine followed up with queen g4, protecting the pawn on g7 and attacking the pawn on h4. Now queen f6 was given as the best move here by the computer, because then rook takes h4, but then knight c6 comes and it's relatively equal for both players, because the d4 pawn and the g7 pawn both can't be protected at the same time. Instead though, Mr. No Name decided to play bishop to e7 here to protect the pawn on h4, and Alekhine here decided to play an unusual move, I'd say, g3, attacking the pawn on h4. But this pawn can't be taken. For instance, if black now decides to take on g3, rook h8 and white's just winning. If g takes f2, just king takes and white's going to queen. Rook's forced to take and white gets a queen. Black can resign here if they wanted to. So instead of taking, No Name played c5, undermining the e4 square. And Alekhine continued with g takes h4, and black played c takes d4, and now this is where things get interesting. White could opt to play queen takes d4 here to protect the pawn on g7 and take the pawn off, but comes knight c6, and after queen d3, rook takes g7, white is actually worse off here. In the game though, Alekhine decided to sack his knight here. He played h5, trying to get a queen with these two pawns. Black kindly accepted, took on c3 with the knight, and now comes h6, threatening h7 where white will queen. But black does the same, plays c takes b2, attacking the rook. So the rook's forced to b1, and black comes in with a check and king e2, and after king e2 black has the option here to get a draw. There is a perpetual, just queen a6, and after king d2 just queen a5, king e2, queen a6 again, king d2, queen a5. If white plays a move like c3 here, bishop f6 would come, and if white tries to defend all this, bishop takes g7, h takes, and just something like d4, black's given back the piece and is in quite a nice position. If rook takes b2, we can continue with queen g5, king d1, just develop. And after d takes, knight takes, queen takes g7, black just comes out better with an extra 2 pawns. Maybe not as developed, but you take black all day in this position. But instead of perpetual, black goes for it. He plays queen takes a2, attacking the b1 rook, and white also goes for it. Alekhine plays h7, attacking the rook on g8. If rook takes g7 here, white queens with a check, and white is just doing much better. So instead of taking on g7, queen takes b1 was played, and now Alekhine queened as well, takes the rook with check, the king's forced to d7, and takes on f7. and the queen takes on c2 for black. Things are getting a bit more complicated now. The king moves to f3 and knight c6 is played, threatening knight e5 check, where it will fork all these lovely queens. So instead of opting in for those complications, Alekhine decided to take on e6 with their own queen. Queen takes e6 check, and black does have to be very careful in this position. If king d8 here, queen d6 would lead to mate, with bishop takes, promote to a queen, bishop f8 and queen takes is checkmate. So black opts the smart option and plays king c7 here, and Alekhine continue with queen f4 check, and the king's forced to b6. But now the queen on e6 is attacked, and Alekhine drops it back to e3 with check. Another move here was actually queen takes e7, and if knight takes e7, queen b4 check, and king c7 and takes the knight, bishop d7, and just queen e5, the king moves back, but now we come rook h6, and white's getting an attack together here. If the bishop moves c6, we've got another check for white. The king's forced to a5, and something like bishop d3, if black queens, we could just take on c2, and white's just absolutely winning this position. So queen takes e7 was an option in this particular position. Instead, Alekhine opted more simply for e3 check, but now comes bishop c5, and this is a bit of a problem. The queen's attacked and also the f2 pawn, so white now has to be very careful indeed. So now there are several moves that white could play here. If queen e2, this is actually terrible for white, believe it or not, because now black gets another queen, and if white also gets their own queen, bishop h3 is a disastrous move for white. The queen on g8 is attacked, and now the pawn on f2 and the bishop on f1 are both undermined. If queen takes d5, bishop takes f1 can be played, and if queen takes c2, just queen takes c2. The f2 pawn's now under threat. If knight h3 to protect, bishop takes h3, rook takes h3. Here comes rook f8 and the queen's pinned against the king. If queen takes f8, just queen takes f2, king g4, and after the smoke's cleared with bishop takes f8, black is now in a dominant position. Another move that white could play is bishop to d3. If bishop takes e3, bishop takes c2, black clears up the queens, white now gets another one. But bishop g4, just queen takes g4, knight e5, white actually clears up the pieces with king takes f4, knight takes g4, king takes g4, rook g8, and king f4. So white now has two extra pieces, black's got more pawns, but it looks like white's winning here. However, I feel like Alekhine opted for the strongest move. He just got another queen in this position. Simple enough. But now black gets another queen. And here we have unbelievably 5 queens on the board. So this is incredibly hard to calculate. But again, I think Alekhine played the correct move here. Rook h6. That knight on c6 is absolutely key, because now Alekhine could potentially check on d8 with the queen, or at some point b4 because this knight is now pinned. If black opts for bishop to g4 here, queen can take on g4, bishop takes e3, queen takes e3, queen takes c5, king takes c5, king g2. You have to say white is in a much better position now. So that wasn't played. Instead, black takes on f1, but this turns out to be a mistake. Now, can you spot the winning move? If you want, just pause the video here and I'll give you 5 seconds just to see if you can see the winning move. It's a brilliant move. So white here actually played queen b4 check, and that can't be taken by the bishop because it's pinned, and the knight's also pinned, remember. So queen b5 is a free check, the queen's forced to go back to b5, and now comes queen d8 check. Again the knight's pinned, king a6, and we get the last queen into the game, queen e a3 check, and now black's forced to retreat their own queen. But now comes just takes, and queen takes a4 is checkmate. So this is an absolutely astounding game. It does almost seem too unbelievable, so I can see why people think it might be fake. I'm just surprised he found this rook h6 move, because it's the only move that keeps white in the game, and it's very hard to spot, so that's really good if Alekhine played this in a real game. Anyway, I just thought I'd show you this because you never see 5 queens on the board at the same time. If you enjoyed my videos, please give it a like and maybe subscribe if you want to enjoy more chess content, and I'll see you in the next one.